One of the things that is really valuable with Docker is it makes it much easier to quickly spin up staging and test environments, create digital twins of our production environment, and it gives each developer a way to, have their own fully integrated test environment. A couple different tools we can do to manage that is, for one, we talked about aliases in networks, but there's also the hostname key, which really just allows us to give each of our containers a specific name. That way, if our production gateway is production front end and we have a production back end, well, we could simulate it in our test environment to call them the same thing. That way, when we're in test, we don't have to spin everything up, change some connections behind the scenes, and then run our tests. We could just spin it up, run all our tests, and wait to see how it succeeds. One of the other benefits is, creating multiple environments. Having development, test, and production Docker Compose stacks make it a bit easier sometimes to manage having a suite of tools that you need to spin up and bring down for every project. Kevin mentioned that you may have two gateways in a database, so on and so forth. Well, you could do the same thing and just have a development copy, a test copy, and a production copy that gives each of your developers a way to spin this up locally and get through the entire process on their own before we move things along the dev test production path. A third tool that can really help with testing and validation is, you mentioned Portainer, but you could do the same thing, leveraging a container server somewhere on your enterprise network that you use to spin up and break down containers for non-container leveraging users. Maybe all of your developers are working on a project together, but you've got a project manager who doesn't need to dig into the weeds of Docker every time they want to see one of your development branches. Well, you can go ahead, spin that container up on the container server, give the project manager a URL that they can go directly to, and now they can go through and see the application that's being worked on while the other engineers are working on their own local environments. Testing really becomes a lot easier when you start spinning up and breaking down containers so that you can turn Ignition into a tool to use ad hoc through your development lifecycle and your testing and production lifecycle. One comment on one of the things that Kevin was doing before that didn't get said that I want to highlight, not exactly a testing thing, but is the efficiency of all these different gateways running together. I think Kevin has 7 Ignition gateways running on his laptop after all that effort. And they probably are using very little memory and CPU utilization. That's one of the values of Docker is ad hoc containers just coming up and down and using them for whatever.